Our next guest is a Fortean, and we'll find out exactly what that is from him. He is also the editor-in-chief of Pursuit magazine. Welcome, please, John Keel. John, how are you? So you're a Fortean, eh?
Oh, well, I've been trying to outgrow it. Actually,
what is a Fortean? It's spelled F-O-R-T-E-A-N. What is that?
Back in the early part of the century, there was a man named Charles Fort who spent his entire life in the New York Public Library, going through the old scientific journals and old newspapers, and he published a series of books about strange things that turned up in these old journals, like when it would rain frogs in France, or red snow in Switzerland. He kept track of all these things, did a series of books, and we started calling these events Fortean events.
I see.
And today we still keep track.
Now, the two examples you cited there, I've heard of raining the frogs, and it's always a matter of, it's either one, an old wives' tale. Remember the time it rained wives' tales? Or it's disputed in some, they can just say, well, there were frogs in the trees. When it rained, they jumped out.
Well, we have compiled a list of several thousand mysterious things that have fallen from the sky. They documented things. They include things like stone pillars, cannonballs, all kinds of strange things. In China, it once rained raw meat.
No,
and
no.
There's no explanation.
When in China did it rain raw meat?
Well, quite a while ago. It was in the 19th century.
Now, how is it that all the unexplained things took place in the 19th century or before?
They're still taking place.
Give me a recent unexplained thing, other than Amazing Al.
Every January and February, here in the Northeast, we have what we call skyquakes. They get into the papers sometimes. Now, recently, they've been blaming the Concorde for this. But this has been going on. We've been keeping track of this since about 1840.
What is a skyquake?
It's an explosion in the sky. We have no explanation for it. We've got a lot of pseudo-explanations.
Well, how do we know when we hear one or see one?
Because it's like when a jet plane passes over at, Mach 2. It's like breaking the sound barrier. It's an explosion that sometimes shatters windows, and so on. And this has been going on in Connecticut, for example. The Indians had legends about this going way back. So this has been going on for a very long time, but every time it happens, the scientists come up with a new far-fetched explanation for it.
What is the most common or daily unexplained occurrence? I mean, something that we would all say, yeah, that's that thing. We can't explain it. What?
Well, we don't necessarily have daily occurrences, but in recent years, the UFO phenomenon has been very common around the world. Right now, it's going on in Argentina. And while a lot of people think they have an explanation for it, actually, we're just beginning to find out what's really going on with the UFO phenomenon.
UFOs are pretty much, I would guess, if we asked the audience, we'd probably find over half of them said, yeah, they have reason to believe there's something going on out there, I think.
At least 10% of them have probably seen one themselves.
Has anybody here ever seen one of these things? People applaud if you've seen one. And how many of you think there may be something visiting us? What other things fall into the category of unexplained phenomenon?
Well, we have mysterious animals that turn up all over the world.
Like what?
Here in the United States, every year or two, we have kangaroos jumping around Illinois, Connecticut, various parts of the United States. We know there are no kangaroos here. The police go out and chase them, shoot at them. They disappear. We never...
So what is your theory? Where do you think they're coming from?
The same place that the dinosaurs are coming from, because we have dinosaurs turning up every couple of years. About 10 years ago in Italy, the Italian army turned out to chase a dinosaur in the mountains of northern Italy. And they leave dinosaur footprints, and that's the end of them. They can't find where they've been, where they've gone. We've got better monsters than that. We've got our sea serpents, which... We have several lakes in the United States that have sea serpents, not just Loch Ness.
Where is a serpent in this country?
Lake Champlain in New York State.
Really? What is up there?
Henry Hudson, who was the first to go up there, reported seeing, Henry Hudson and his crew saw a sea serpent in Lake Champlain, and every year somebody sees it up there. And nobody has yet organized an expedition to go up there and really look into it.
Well, let's you and me drive up there.
All right, we'll go up there next week.
We'll take the Italian Army with us. We'll get those boys. And have we ever photographed this sea serpent?
Well, the one in Loch Ness has been photographed any number of times. Now, movies have been made of it. And the movies have been examined by the RAF and other specialists, and they're obviously some kind of large animal that's living in Loch Ness.
Now, this, what do we have here? This
is a plaster cast of a Bigfoot print. Now, you've all heard of the abominable snowman in the Himalayas. We have in the United States, we have a creature that's variously called Sasquatch or Bigfoot. And he's found not just in Washington and Oregon, but he's found all over the United States, especially in the Mississippi Valley, and even in New Jersey. We have quite a lot of reports out of New Jersey, and that's where this footprint comes from.
This is from Uncle Lou and Bob. That's what it says here.
There are two Forteans in New Jersey.
Now,
this is an authentic footprint.
Did you make the cast?
No, they did. They're well-known Forteans. Bob is an airlines pilot, and Uncle Lou is a dental surgeon in New Jersey, and they're very active.
I don't know why that's funny. It just sounds funny.
Dental surgeons make good casts.
How big would this guy be based on this foot?
He would be about 800 pounds, probably 8 or 9 feet tall. And that's what the witnesses are always describing, incredible as it is. And in, of course, the Himalayas, the abominable snowman.
Now that, I think, that we believe in, or at least I do. To me, it seems like, sure, it's possible that something left over that survived the Ice Age or didn't survive it or something, you know, that there may be a missing link and so on and so forth. Some of this other stuff, like the red snow, what was the red snow?
Well, the usual scientific explanation for that is that the sands of the Sahara are somehow drawn into clouds and drop in Switzerland.
Now, I can believe that.
Except there are no red sands in the Sahara Desert. And I've spent part of my life on the Sahara.
What if the sand went up and was somehow oxidized and turned red? Isn't that a possibility?
Well, they've made various chemical analysis of this kind of snow. We've had black snow, too.
Yellow snow, I'm familiar with that. I think we were all waiting for that one, weren't we? Yes.
We just don't know what really causes this phenomenon. The sand explanation doesn't work.
Is there one in particular that keeps you awake at night, that just gnaws at you?
Well, there's some frightening things going on, yeah.
Like what? What are we scared of here?
The animal mutilations that have been going on around the country, especially out west in recent years. But they're also going on in Brazil and France and Australia and Switzerland, Sweden.
And these are not pranks or sick jokes?
Thousands of animals have been slaughtered now by some mysterious group. They drain all the blood from the animals. And they also perform expert operations on the animals, removing certain organs. And veterinarians who have examined these animals say they can't duplicate the operations.
That's amazing. I would also like to know why cab drivers in this city don't speak English, but we'll never figure that one out. We have to pause. Mr. John Keel, accordion, ladies and gentlemen. Edwin Newman will be with us.
About a generation ago, and it gives me the shudders to think that it was a generation ago, I was running around the country, sitting up all night in cemeteries and sitting on hilltops in remote parts of the country, looking for these funny lights in the sky that were everywhere in the 1960s. There was one hilltop in particular that overlooked the Ohio River, where at that time there was a lot of boat traffic on the Ohio River day and night. And these funny lights would come down out of the sky and circle around these boats that were transporting cargo up the Ohio River. And the boatmen would turn on their searchlights and play games with these lights. The lights would jump out of the way of the searchlights. And I was sitting on my hilltop watching these games going on. And I would flash this flashlight at these funny lights, and they would jump out of the way of my flashlight. And so I'd flash in Morse code at these lights, and they would do whatever I ordered them to do. And then later, I decided that instead of using Morse code, I'd make up my own code. And they knew this code, which gave me a lot of concern at the time. And I gradually figured out during this period that we could control these so-called flying saucers. They weren't saucers, they were lights. And I was sitting alone, and one of these lights came down very close to my car, and passed over, there was a wooded area all around me. These hills were all wooded hills. And it passed over these woods, and it seemed to descend right into the forest right next to my car. And the next day when I woke up in my motel room there, my eyes were very sore, like they were full of sand. And this is a common effect of looking at these lights. It's called conjunctivitis. It's like looking into a bright arc light. And so the fact that my eyes were affected was proof that I had seen something there. Now, in the years 1964 to 1968, there was a worldwide epidemic of these lights. And I don't mean that it was an occasional light in the sky. They were everywhere, every damn night of the week. Time magazine did big editorials about it. The New York Times did front-page stories about it. Now, I realized that the best way to tackle this was to pick one or two spots and make them a microcosm of the whole thing, and just study everything in that spot. Learn to know the people, study every event that happened, whether it was related to these things or not. We call them UFOs, but that's really not a good name for them. They were like living lights. These lights had an intelligence of their own. I made Point Pleasant, West Virginia, sort of my headquarters in '66. My first step in arriving in a strange town, a new town, was always to go to the police station and introduce myself to the police. In those days, I carried a pile of press credentials. I was writing in newspaper columns and so on. So I would introduce myself to the police so that they knew I was just another harmless nut. In November of 1966, 4 young people in a car, they were driving past this building, and they saw what looked like a very large man, 6 or 7 feet tall, standing next to this power plant. And for some reason, he scared the death out of them. They were all scared to death. So the boy who was driving hit the accelerator, and they drove out of there at a high speed. And looking back, this thing rose up in the air and followed their car. And they were going over 60 miles an hour on these dirt roads. And this thing was flying right along with them. So they drove straight to the police station. Now you have to realize in small towns, teenagers do not go to the police station voluntarily. And the police were so convinced by their behavior that they held a press conference the next day. And reporters from the local newspapers, from Charlotte and other cities around there, came to hear this very bizarre story of this flying man. At that time, Batman was very popular on television. So the newspapers labeled this creature Mothman. And that was the beginning of the Mothman caper, I guess you'd call it. And the next year, there were over 100 reports of this Mothman. Some of the people who reported seeing this thing were not only adults, they were responsible adults like bankers and local officials, the lady who was sort of the head of the Chamber of Commerce. In the Christmas season of 1967, in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, there was a bridge called the Silver Bridge that crossed the Ohio River. And on December 15th, 1967, that bridge collapsed, and it was loaded down with cars, people who had been Christmas shopping, and that sort of put a damper on all my investigations. Because I knew some of the people who had gone down with the bridge, and some of these people had been Mothman witnesses. And so I did just one magazine article on the whole subject, and it was a short article. It was about 2,000 words. I gave one talk on the radio about it, on Long John Neville's show, and that was the extent of my involvement. Now today, when you pick up any encyclopedia of the strange or anything, it always says that John Keel is the center of the Mothman thing. And one of the newspapers in West Virginia did a long editorial against me, saying that I was exploiting the situation and making a big profit from it. Of course, little do they know, I made no profit at all from it.
Venusians?
No, the movie.